Well, now, what an absolute pleasure to have to the show now, Trevor ToeCracker Crook. Trev, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure to be on your show, buddy.
Not as much of a pleasure it is to have you here. And what we're going to do now is get to know a little bit more about the man behind the name, Trevor ToeCracker Crook. And there's a few things we can touch on here. I mean, we can go back to Queensland, Australia. We can go back to sport and cricket. We can go back to banking, finance and sales. We can touch on copywriting, and I think we might. We can talk about Gdansk and Poland, and we can talk about the international lifestyle, but we're not going to start with any of those. We're going to start about those bloody shoes. Tell us about the ToeCracker shoes, Trev.
Yeah, well, because a lot of people think that the shoes are due to me buying a pair and call myself ToeCracker, but I was actually staggering home drunk way back in 2009 from a bar in Vancouver, because the next day I was flying to Matt Bacak's birthday bash for Mark Joyner in Atlanta in 2009. And I spot the original ToeCrackers in this shoe store window. And I was like, they look pretty good. Snakeskin inserts, chrome metal tips. Couldn't remember where it was. It's like, but when I got back to Vancouver from the event, I went back to the bar where I was and just retraced my steps and found them. And bought a pair, and then I just kept buying pairs of shoes, and they just seemed to fit with they fit my style, not in summer, but they fit. And, you know, people stop you, men, women, I got people wanting to buy them, got people saying, hey, ToeCracker, when are you going to get your own ToeCracker brand of shoes? I'll buy them. So it's just something I like. They're definitely a talking point, and they're actually comfortable, surprisingly.
Well, what comes to mind is when ToeCracker wears those shoes, men want to be like you and women want to, and you know the rest. So, all right, Trevor, you're living an international lifestyle and you do post about this regularly. What is this like, this international lifestyle? It's almost like the lifestyles of the rich and famous.
Yeah, it wasn't planned. It just sort of evolved from 2005 to 2006. I was still living in Australia and in the throes of the second divorce, but I had 10 trips to the US and 3 to London to speak at various events. I was constantly back and forth, and then I was like, oh, I'm just going to, shit's hit the fan. I'm going to go to the US for a few months. And then just the travel bug well and truly gripped me. And I was like, I need to convert my all offline 95% offline business, which it was, to all online. So I decided to make that transition, which wasn't an easy one because you do take a hit financially. But once I'd done that, it allowed me to just live anywhere with a good internet connection. And that's long before that old digital nomad term was ever put into circulation. And I've just been living that lifestyle ever since. I've been fortunate to live in the Mediterranean, Malta for 5 years on the islands, and live in Tuscany, Italy, and Poland, and Cyprus on the Mediterranean, but on the far side, Costa Rica, US, Canada, and of course, now I'm home base is in Panama.
It's just terrific to see your posts, as I do, and many of your followers do, on Facebook, either at the beers, Bourbon, and
Business.
Thank you. That was a cue. You reckon I would have that written down, wouldn't you? Which is pretty much how I first came to know of you, although more personally that is. But I first started seeing the name Trevor. First of all, Trevor ToeCracker Crook was never Trevor Crook or Crooksy or mate. It was always Trevor ToeCracker Crook in different posts. And when I started back in 2007, Trevor started reading and following internet marketing. And so this is where your name came up. And of course, the name stuck in my mind, and also because you're a fellow Australian. And then, I don't know when it was, 2012, 2013, 14, something like that, when I saw you on Facebook and joined your group and got to know you, and then was fortunate enough to be mentored by you. And we can talk about your mentoring as well. But this podcast, this show is all about the comeback and making the comeback. And many of the people, Trevor, listening to you and viewing you now on YouTube could be going through some kind of a setback themselves right now, coming through adversity. And as you mentioned there before, you've come through 2 divorces, and anyone who's been through divorce would know and empathize that it just ain't a pretty ride in most cases. You've come through that, but at that time, at some time, it wasn't easy for you. In fact, you went through a pretty tough time, didn't you?
Oh yeah, and I'm happy to share about it because yeah, if it just helps one person, then it's all worthwhile. So yeah, I mean, apart from the financial hit, mentally, especially over children and stuff like that, it had me dancing with the devil. I mean, I was very suicidal for many years, and fortunately, the 2 times I had a crack at it, I didn't succeed. And but I was definitely in a dark place. So for many years, and it would get worse around birthdays and Christmas and stuff like that. And what was interesting was in 2009, I did an event in Calgary where the Dalai Lama was there, Richard Branson, a whole bunch of really highly successful people, and a gentleman by the name of Shaun Stephenson, who was he had a lot of debilitating injuries and overcame a lot of things. And I spoke to Shaun at the event after I'd bought his book, and he put it really into perspective for me. He said, "You didn't want to die. You wanted your pain to go away, and that was the only way that you could rationalize to end your pain." Right? And that really, really hit me hard. And I wasn't ready to read his book. I tried, and I just couldn't read it. His book is called Get Off Your Butt, BUT, all about self-sabotage. And then in 2010, just before Christmas, I'd had enough again, and I'd written a letter and all that sort of stuff, and I was going for a one-way swim in the Mediterranean. I had a friend staying with me just for a couple of days, before she was moving to England. And reality was she saved me because she opened the door as I was about to head out the door and not come back. And so it drained me for a few days mentally, obviously. And then, once I sort of got my strength back, the same thing I did every morning. I'd take my cup of coffee and go and walk out in my patio, which overlooked the Mediterranean, Malta. I'd walk past the bookstore, the bookshelf, but that particular book looked about 10 feet tall. It was time. And I read it. And that was the start of the comeback. That was the start of me having the mentality shifts that I needed to go, you know what? You've got to do a lot of forgiving and get your shit together. And so the book was amazing. And that was the start of it. And then I did some self-development courses in the US, actually, through a company called PSI Seminars. I did the initial one at 3 days. Then I signed up for the week-long program. And they really rip into you and rip into everything that stems back to your childhood and everything else that you believe people have wronged you by or you've wronged yourself for, and help you put it back together. So it took a couple of years. It really, really did. But, once I started to get the head well and truly right, I was backfiring on not all cylinders. I was probably on about 4 out of 6. Right. But then I suddenly got up to the 6 and holy shit, I'm a V8 again. And it was really, really interesting because that allowed me to realize that not only am I getting my life back together, it made me realize that I've been ripping people off, not intentionally, but what I mean by ripping them off is not being able to, not allowing myself or even letting them know that I could help them mentor wise or, like sharing the knowledge that I've learned over the years and been able to help a lot of other people with. So it sort of all came together, but it took some time. And, now it's just, unstoppable is an overused word, but I just got that feeling that, I've made some very big decisions that nothing is going to get in my way. And I'm happy to rebuild again because I was in that really stuck mindset, stuck like quicksand. That's why I don't really like the word mindset, because most people's minds are set in quicksand. They don't know how to get out and have a mentality shift. But it was a Grant Cardone audio that I was listening to around 2014. I'm starting to pull my head out of my what. And he said something that's really resonated with me. And it was basically that because of I was still giving myself self-sabotage because I'd built myself up twice and I'd lost it twice through divorce, although it's never 100% one person's responsibility. I took responsibility for my issues on those. But I was telling myself, what's the point of really building it again? Because someone's just going to take it off you. So I was I was cruising. And as an entrepreneur, when you know how to generate income, you can also reduce your income to live, in my case, the international lifestyle, which has always been a good lifestyle. Right. But I realize now, and especially of the last, in the last year especially, that's not enough for when I do want to retire. So yeah, I've been through the ringer and I've come out of it. I don't mind sharing it with people because, when you get to those dark places, and I've had people that I've helped as well, and when you tell them, well, you don't really want to harm yourself, it's just you don't know how to deal with your pain, you don't know how to make it go away, and this seems the best solution. And I've even spoken to a couple of people this week who I'd connected through with my own group, and they're saying, yeah, we're going through some stuff. I said, let's jump on a call. Let's see if I can help you. I'm not selling you anything, but I've been in a similar situation where you are, and let me give you some clarity on it.
Thanks, Trev, for sharing that. And it might sound cliche from me to say to you, congratulations on making your comeback and coming through. But the sentiment and the intent when I say congratulations, and as someone who's been through that path myself, I totally relate. And this is why I have empathy and a love for you and for what you do and the way you do it, Trevor. All right, mate. So, and that book, by the way, Shaun Stephenson, the title?
Get Off Your Butt, B-U-T.
Yeah. You recommended that book to me when you were mentoring me back in 2016 or thereabouts. And I've got it on Audible, the Audible version. And I've listened to it multiple times and I highly recommend it. And thank you for recommending that book, Trevor. So,
my pleasure.
You're an Aussie from Queensland. You played a lot of sport. You played cricket. You loved your sport. And you spent a lot of time and had your, correct me if I'm wrong, your first, shall we say, business success in the banking finance arena, selling finance. Can you just touch on that part of your history?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I joined the bank at 16, right? And I'd left school when I was 14 years and 8 months with a junior high school certificate, right? And actually skipped year 8, all except 6 weeks. So I was a little bit lucky, but I made a bet with the school principal, and he accepted the challenge. But so I go into banking, and I'm this, long-haired lout, hair to here and halfway down the back. And I start off doing the very first junior job, and I work my way up. And eventually the loans, one of the loans managers noticed, in his words, my work ethic, because he'd be working late and I'd still be there in a different department getting my stuff done for the day before I went home. So they invited me to the loans department. And then I started to relieve in management roles. And this is like 1987 and 88. And then at the ripe old age of 26, I got my first ever bank manager stripes. And I went from one side of the country to the other, to Geraldton in WA, which is the rock lobster capital of the country. And most of my clients were very, very wealthy people because they're rock lobster fishermen. And so I just got to work my way up. And then in 93, I left a management position to move back to Queensland because my twin sons were very little then. They were babies. And, it was quite a hard decision, it seemed at the time, to leave a management position for a non-management position. But I did. And don't regret that at all, because the bank that I went to was very, very, they're risk takers. But within 6 months, I doubled the income from the previous job and got a management position, which would have taken me 10 years previously in the other bank to get to.
Right.
And I learned a lot. I mean, my team, we do $150, $200 million in lending a year in the construction industry, like big stuff. If the head office had one time they'd finance this massive oil tanker. So I'd have to go and do approve the progress payments and do the inspections and stuff like that. But my banking days really led me to understand business a lot. I estimate I stopped counting at 350 sort of different niches that I'd interviewed, over 10,000 business owners that I interviewed for loans, and probably assessed at least 35,000 sets of financial statements. In 1996, I decided to become a finance broker and broker deals between the banks. And I got very good at that. But then I was like, even when I decided that was the first realm into working for myself, I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then in 2001, I get into this thing called copywriting after I'd bought the non-exclusive resale rights of all of Dan Kennedy's products and books at the time for $25K.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't have the money because I was still reeling from my first divorce. But fortunately for me, the master seller accepted Amex, which I still had in my possession. So I dumped it on the Amex, and then waited about 2 weeks to get the master set. I was like, what do I do? The bill's due in a couple of weeks. And I happened to see an advert for a trade show in Brisbane at the time. So I called them up. What's your smallest booth? This size, what's the price? I think it was $3,500. You take Amex, yep, ka-ching. So it racked up about 30K on that bill. Took a risk, yeah. But when the bill came, I was able to pay it in full. Not only that was from selling products, but also I picked up my first ever copywriting client who I charged $10,000 for.
Now, thanks, Trevor. I just want to pause there because I've got this written note. If you could see my notes, I've actually got it written here: copywriting dash first client $10,000. And I wanted to touch on that. I'm glad you bring it up now because you see it. I've seen it when I was copywriting for clients, and new and not so new copywriters who work freelance have a trouble with fees and getting their first client. And yet you landed your first client for 10K back how long ago?
2001.
So over 20 years ago, first paying client 10 grand. And can I ask what was the most you've been paid for your copywriting services, if I may ask?
80,000.
Okay, so
right, that was a group. That was a few projects for a client. Individual, $64,464 from one client, and they still do owe me some royalties, which I'll never see. But look, being an ex-banker, especially in the lending area, where I'm either approving deals myself. Like my last role, I could sign off $1 million myself, secured, 100K unsecured. I was like the second in charge manager, the senior manager, myself, and our regional could sign off 5 million or 500K unsecured. But everything was done in proposal format. If I'm sending a $20 million deal up the line to the ivory tower, well, sure, the numbers have got to stack up and the security's got to be there, but you've got to tell the freaking story. You've got to give that pencil pusher a reason to go, yes, this is a good deal, right? So when I got into copywriting, I was like, well, why don't I just do a proposal to this guy, right? And so I did. And I mean, that letter went on to be very successful for him. The copy helped for sure. But I've always done that format. And then in about 2012, I adjusted from the generic document that I would send to close people. Otherwise, I'd have a Zoom call or Skype back then.
Yeah.
Right. I'd have a Zoom call. I'd get off the call. I'd never give them a fee. I never reveal the fees on the call. I'd look at what we discussed and I'd put everything together in my document and send it off. And it was converting around 90%, right? Copywriting about 90%, mentoring, give or take similar rates.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize such a valuable document I had for many years. I mean, I was teaching it to the copywriters that I mentored, and then, they're all doubling, well, not all, roughly 85%. And I've mentored a lot of copywriters. Around 85% would double their fees in 90 days as well. And I still didn't click that this was something that's even bigger. But about 5 years ago, I started to do a little bit of done with you to some clients in different niches, tradesmen, consultants, coaches. And guess what? They're all charging more and they're converting higher. When you can go from 15% to 60% in 90 days in conversions, double your fees, that's a 400% increase in conversions, let alone you've doubled your fees. And so I'm actually in the process of another situation is like, I need to help as many coaches, consultants, anyone doing a quote to convert more. And a lot of people, this as well, you're quite the master salesman, are fearful of selling. They hate that part of the process. So they'll put some lame ass document together and they'll lowball themselves because they're fearful of getting no if the fee is too high.
Yeah.
And of course, they're always right. What I found really interesting was when I was mentoring, whether it's copywriters or people, business owners that are sending some sort of proposals, but predominantly the copywriters, they had to send me their proposal to review before it went off to the prospect. And a lot of times, Mike, I would just change the fee. I'd put it up. A couple of grand, $3,000, $4,000. Biggest one was a 5,000 US change for an Aussie guy. He was happy at his 8K because he'd like to do the conversions. I changed it to 13. I probably should have pushed it to 15 because the client just said, yes, where can I send you the money? So you got an extra 5,000 on top of what he was going to be happy with at 8,000, which is obviously about 60% more. By him following my template, my format, But me review it and go, no, I know that scope of work there it's worth this. That's just beautiful, I think, for people. And it just, it changes their lives. So that's really cool. So that's, part of my mission now is to teach that to as many people as I can, because let's face it, you start converting more prospects, you start putting more money in the bank account. Imagine the impact that has on you, your loved ones, and the ripple effect on everybody else you touch in your life. Maybe you're employing people. Maybe you have a virtual assistant. You might spend more money at the grocery store. You might tip more at a restaurant. The ripple effect is just profound. So I'm buzzing about this because, it's like, it's time.
Yeah. I sense it too, Trevor. I sense the buzz about it. And can I just add weight to the audience watching you on YouTube now or listening to you on the podcast? If you are a business owner, if you are a coach, a consultant, or a copywriter or a freelancer, and you submit quotes, as Trevor said, or you're thinking about maybe you should do it in a more formal way, such as a proposal, if you get the chance, contact Trevor. You're accepting inquiries for new mentoring clients yourself, aren't you, at the moment, Trevor?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so contact Trevor, and if you're fortunate to receive Trevor's outline for how to put a proposal together, it is business changing, life changing, business changing, because I went through that process, Trevor, and I received your proposal before I became one of your mentees, and I just whenever after I worked with you, you worked with me, you helped me. Whenever I quoted, I always thought of Trevor's advice. And in fact, I tagged something onto it. I would quote and say, for example, my fee is $5,000. And once you pay me that money, you'll never see it again. And of course, that always broke the, and then we'd go on and talk about, guarantees and no guarantees and et cetera, et cetera. Trevor, you have your second event coming up, I think in April or May this year at Gdansk in Poland. Is that right?
Yes, it's 16th to the 18th of May, all about market domination.
Okay, tell us a bit more about that, or have you already got all your seats filled?
No, I don't have all the seats filled. It's a 3-year delayed event due to Rona, so I've had it sort of pretty much half sold for a while. I'm just doing the push now. So I've got people will learn a lot, obviously, but I've got people talking about Facebook ads, YouTube, LinkedIn expert, a couple of different copywriters, and for actual copywriters listening to this, Paris Lampropoulos is speaking twice, and he rarely speaks unless you're a good friend and you can twist his arm. So I did that. And there might be one old character I did a previous event for that I'm going to get there as well. So I won't say that name just yet until I've got him locked in. But apart from learning stuff, here's the kicker. There are people at that event who are already doing good 7 figures. There's a couple doing 8 figures. There's many people doing low to mid high 6 figures. The networking that happened at my previous event is worth people flying thousands of miles for to attend.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you're going to learn something, but it's the relationships and the networking. I mean, I've got testimonies from the previous event where I was talking to a couple over a couple of beers the day after the event, and I was like, well, you need to talk to that guy. And they said, why? And he was an attendee. He's now one of the speakers. And I said, because he can help you. Struck a $25K deal between them. And then he's helping them, blow their business up. One of the guys there's in the supplement space, and I used to mentor him. He was doing about mid to high 7 figures. And I said, well, you need to talk to that guy. And this is a guy that would never have done business with this guy if he hadn't met him face to face. Right? There's an ad agency guy. Right? There was a copywriter there, junior copywriter, who actually wrote the sales letter for me for the Poland event. Helped her secure a $7K a month retainer and royalties with a supplement guy. Right. One of the attendees became my business partner. I keep my events to around 50 people plus the speakers so that everybody can get to network with each other. And I put on, when I have my parties, it's open bar and nonstop food. Right. And
it's a top class event, Trevor. I've not attended, but I've seen, I mix in online in circles of people that have attended, and I've read the testimonies and feedback, and the common theme, the common thread is there's no other event, absolutely no other event like it. And so if you're in the market for such an event, where would people go online, Trevor, if they want to know more about this event or know more about you or even make contact with you? What's the best place where they can find you?
Well, Yeah, I mean, my email is just toecracker@gmail.com. If they go to smofo.com, smofo.com, and also obviously I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/toecracker.
Okay.
And if they just mention the podcast, because yeah, I mean, there is an event link, obviously, but it's a little bit long right now to be rattling off. But yeah, I want, I set the bar high for myself last time, because at the previous event, I'm doing a birthday bash for Drayton Bird's 83rd. I got John Carlton flying in from Europe, who's never spoken outside of the US. Bond Halbert, Matt Bacak, these big names, Ben Simpkin, Facebook's, golden haired boy on for buying traffic. Pauline Longdon coming from us. I had people flying in from all over the world, literally to come to the event. So I wanted to make sure it was unlike anything they've ever attended. And if you can blow Carlton away, you're doing okay. Right. And he got blown away. I've got it in writing, right? So, and I set the bar high last time, but I've even raised it for this time. People will find out when it's done, and they'll see the videos. Might have something to do with AC/DC, but that's about as much.
Okay, there's a little bit of a hint there. I know you're an Akataka fan, Trevor. Time always flies when you're having fun, and those links will be in the show. I'll pop those in the show notes. So if you're watching on YouTube, just drop down to the show notes. If you're listening to this on a podcast, just drop down again to the show notes, and those links are there. So that's, did you say April or May? Pardon me, April.
It's the 16th to the 18th of May. With a pre-event 4-hour, open bar, free-flowing food the night before. 16th and 17th is a general admission. 18th is VIP day and VIP night.
Okay, terrific. And this is 2023.
Yeah.
Trevor ToeCracker Crook, what an absolute pleasure to have you on the Comeback Coach podcast. I love you, buddy, and I love what you do. I love your posts, and you are the comeback king as far as what you've come through and how you've done it, and now you're kicking ass and ripping a few apart while you're on your journey to wherever you're going next.
That's always enjoyable, when you can make someone cry and they for good reason, and they embrace it as nothing personal. They have major breakthroughs. So. But I appreciate you having me on your show, and appreciate our friendship as well. And I look forward to being able to share the recording of this to my people.
Yeah, that's terrific, Trevor. Thank you. And to you, the listener, thank you for joining Trevor ToeCracker Crook and myself on this episode of the Comeback Coach podcast. Until next time, this is Mike Searles signing off.